P. Professor Namyong Lee's commentary. Long, why did Trump post on social media that he would impose a 25% tariff on the Republic of Korea? Hello, this is Professor Namyong Lee TV. Today's long-form commentary analyzes why President Trump posted on social media that he would impose a 25% tariff on the Republic of Korea, focusing on global standards, world best practices, the Federal Enterprise Architecture, FEA, and the statistical structures actually used in policy decision-making. This issue is not about a single tariff rate. It is a systemic problem in which international politics, domestic legislative structures, corporate supply chains, exchange rates, and financial market expectations are all intertwined. Tariffs are not the outcome, but a signal, and signals can only be responded to when they are interpreted through data. Based on relational analysis, this commentary identifies key stakeholders, aligns the magnitude and direction of their power through quantitative indicators, defines the problem, and presents clear prescriptions. The purpose of this commentary is to help honest citizens understand structure rather than succumb to fear. The question of why social media was used instead of a tariff announcement is a matter of policy instrument choice. Formal announcements are accompanied by administrative procedures and institutional buffers, whereas social media moves markets instantly. Over the past 5 years, global financial market volatility indices have shown a pattern of rising by approximately 20 to 30% on average immediately following social media statements by US presidents. This demonstrates that even without legal force, expectations and sentiment can move real economic variables. Social media is not the end point of negotiation, but the opening signal, and that signal first strikes the statistically most sensitive groups, financial markets and large corporate decision makers, stakeholder mapping and power distribution through a relational lens. There are 5 stakeholder groups driving this issue, and their relative power can be compared quantitatively. The first group is the US administration and the president. The United States accounts for approximately $27 trillion in nominal GDP, representing about 26% of global GDP, and constitutes the world's largest single consumer market. The second group is the US Congress and institutional system. If tariffs persist over time, they directly affect domestic consumer prices, and in previous high tariff episodes, approximately 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points of US consumer price inflation were attributed to tariff effects. This translates directly into political costs. The third group is the Government and National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. The Republic of Korea has a highly open economic structure, with exports accounting for approximately 44% of GDP, far exceeding the OECD average. The fourth group consists of export-oriented firms targeting the US market. Exports from the Republic of Korea to the United States amount to roughly $120 to $130 billion annually, representing about 18% of total exports, with automobiles and auto parts accounting for roughly 30% of that total. The fifth group is the financial market. In foreign exchange markets, the KRW-USD exchange rate has repeatedly shown short-term volatility of approximately 3 to 6% when trade risks emerge. These 5 groups are not linked by direct command, but form a relational structure in which they pressure one another through numbers and expectations. Under global standards, the essence of negotiation lies not in statements, but in the scale of constraints. President Trump's social media statements immediately move exchange rates and stock prices, and a 5% exchange rate fluctuation generates upward pressure of approximately 1 to 1.5 percentage points on import prices. Delays in legislative schedules are interpreted as delays in agreement implementation and become the justification for tariff pressure. Firms adjust investment and employment plans not based on whether tariffs have already been imposed, but on whether tariffs are becoming a recurring structural variable. This interconnected structure constitutes the core of the issue. The negotiation, engineering, and political economy of social media announcements. Social media has little legal force, but it preempts policy expectations. Formal announcements typically require weeks or months of procedures, while social media is reflected in markets within minutes. In recent years, following US trade-related social media posts, the currencies of targeted countries have tended to weaken within 1 to 2 trading days, with larger movements observed in export-dependent economies. This approach raises internal costs within counterpart countries in advance, thereby reducing their negotiating power. The first policy motivation is the quantification of visible achievements. Investment volumes in the United States, energy purchase amounts, and job creation figures are all expressed numerically and converted into political outcomes. The second motivation is the signaling effect that the same standards apply even to allies. The third motivation is pressure to align the legislative and administrative execution speed of the Republic of Korea with the US political timetable. The longer the average gap between agreement signing and actual implementation, the more that delay is redefined as non-compliance. Social media tariffs function as a device to compress this time lag, the statistical meaning of the 25% threshold. 25% is not an arbitrary number. The average operating margin of global manufacturing firms generally falls within the 6 to 8% range, while the automotive industry, due to mass production structures, remains around 5%. A 10% tariff can be partially absorbed through exchange rate adjustments or cost reductions, but a 25% tariff exceeds operating profit margins. It forces structural choices: price increases, production relocation, or volume reduction. Automobile exports from the Republic of Korea exceed $70 billion annually, with the United States representing the largest single market. The automotive sector generates extensive spillover effects encompassing parts suppliers, logistics, and finance, in addition to direct employment. Export-related employment accounts for approximately 30% of manufacturing jobs, and tariff shocks transmit immediately to employment and regional economies. Tariffs are therefore not only a trade variable, but also an employment variable. From an engineering perspective, corporate choices can be explained through cost functions. Price pass-through entails demand contraction costs, margin absorption leads to investment and employment contraction costs, and production relocation entails upfront capital expenditure and execution risk. Under world best practices, states design financial, tax, and institutional systems to reduce these choice costs. In an environment where tariffs become a recurring variable, patriotism without structural design cannot be sustained. Quantitative spillover effects on exchange rates, finance, and the real economy. The fastest transmission channel of tariff signals is the exchange rate. A 1% rise in the KRW-USD exchange rate generates approximately 0.2 to 0.3% upward pressure on import prices. Increased exchange rate volatility affects foreign capital flows, simultaneously moving stock prices and bond yields. In equity markets, export-oriented manufacturing sectors are the first to adjust, while in credit markets, corporate financing costs rise. The most critical change in the real economy is the shift in medium to long-term corporate decision-making. When tariffs are perceived not as one-off events but as recurring variables, firms delay investment and consider supply chain restructuring. Supply chain relocation typically takes several years, and once production bases move, they rarely return. This leads not to temporary shocks but to structural losses. A response strategy based on the federal enterprise architecture. Based on the federal enterprise architecture of the US federal government, the response strategy of the Republic of Korea should be designed through functional decomposition and integrated operation. External negotiations, domestic implementation, market stabilization, and industrial strategy functions must be integrated into a single timetable. In the short term, issues raised by the United States should be decomposed into legal procedures, execution speed, and investment scale, and presented with numerical targets and deadlines. In the medium term, implementation roadmaps and mutual monitoring mechanisms should be established to prevent social media statements from destabilizing markets. In the long term, an industrial system capable of maintaining competitiveness even under recurring tariff conditions must be built. President Trump's 25% social media tariff is not a final decision but a pressure signal to change the timetable. However, signals harden into policy if neglected. Responses must be grounded not in emotion but in statistics, structure, schedules, and institutions. In crises, the winning country is not the loudest one, but the one equipped with numbers and systems. It is hoped that the current Lee Jae-myung administration of the Republic of Korea will respond with wisdom. Thank you for watching Professor Nam Yong Lee's commentary long